Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so excited to introduce my guest today, Todd Cherches. Todd is the CEO and co-founder of Big Blue Gumball, a New York City-based consulting firm specializing in leadership development, public speaking, and executive coaching. He is also a 3-time award-winning adjunct professor of leadership in the Human Capital Management Master's Degree program at NYU and a lecturer on leadership at Columbia University. Todd is also a TEDx speaker and the author of the new book, VisuaLeadership, Leveraging the Power of Visual Thinking in Leadership and in Life, which was recently published in May 2020. Please join me in welcoming Todd Cherches. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you, Tammy. Great to be with you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. I'm really excited. So, Todd, as you know, Work from the Inside Out is all about all the twists and turns and places that we go in our careers. And I know that your path that you've taken to get where you are today has taken many different forks in the road. So take us back to some of the earlier years, wherever you want to begin, and tell us about some of your formative years and how that might have informed where you are today.
Sure. I'll start by saying in my NYU class, which is in the Human Resources Master's program, we talk about how very often we talk about career paths, right? What's someone's career path? As if it's a path, as if it's a stroll in the park with stepping stones laid out and there's flowers and trees. It's nothing like that. I would say it's more like a career roller coaster with like you said, with ups and downs, twists and turns, exhilarating highs, terrifying plummets, not knowing what's around the corner, right? So that's what my career has been like. And in that class, it's a 14-session class. Session 14 is we're pulling back the curtain on my career and telling my students the story that I'm about to share a few pieces of with you. So in my TEDx talk on the power of visual thinking, I opened by saying that when I was a kid, growing up in Queens, New York, people would say, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" As people often ask kids. And I would say at age 5 or 6, I want to be Superman. That was my career aspiration. And I love Superman. I was obsessed with Superman. They said, "Well, what if that doesn't work out? What's your backup plan?" And I said, "All right, then my backup plan would be Batman." And they were like, "No, you're not getting the point here." So what's interesting is one of my coaching clients said to me, in some ways, you have aspects of Superman and Batman. As Superman had X-ray vision, you have visual thinking as your superpower. And Batman had his utility belt with all his batarangs and all that kind of stuff. You have all your executive coaching tools, tips, and techniques. So your visual thinking tricks in your toolkit. So, and I love that because in some ways I have aspects of, and what is Superman and Batman all about is saving people and making the world a better place, right? So that's part of part of your you're big on service and helping people maximize their potential and everything. So that's part of my Superman Batman persona.
I love it.
So in lieu of that, I said maybe if I couldn't be a superhero, I'll work in the TV industry. So my goal was to work in television. I was obsessed with television growing up. I had the TV guide memorized and everything. So I got my bachelor's degree in English literature. A lot of people think when clients think I have an MBA or something, but my degree is in English literature with a concentration in Shakespeare and poetry. And my claim to fame in high school was that I had read the complete works of Shakespeare by the time I was 18, all 37 plays, 154 poems and sonnets and 4 poems. So that was my
wow.
So that's one of the good things about having OCD. Once you get hooked on something, you dive in and you don't give up until you're done. So.
Is that what it takes?
Yeah. So it doesn't, there were a lot of negative sides too, but one of the benefits is the attention to detail and obsessive completion of tasks.
Wow.
But that's but seriously, between the entertainment and the literature, a lot of what I do today is around storytelling. It's around character. Think about it. We are each the starring character, the lead character in our own stories, right? Mm-hmm. So stories have a beginning, middle, and end. There's victims, villains, and heroes. There are arcs, right? Ups and downs, twists and turns. So a lot of what I do, especially with my visual thinking, my visual leadership approach, it's also all about seeing things with new eyes. And one of my mantras is, how do you get people to see what you're saying? So
Right.
everything I do is all around, how do I get people to see what you're saying? So after I got my bachelor's in English literature, I got my master's in communication from State University of New York at Albany. I worked at Ogilvy Mather advertising for a year out of college in New York City. And it wasn't a job. I wanted to work in a creative job, and I ended up in the media division, which is all about calculating ratings and shares and buying commercial time. And that just wasn't me. So as much as it was a great experience to live, it was post Mad Men days. So it wasn't quite like the smoking in the office and the lunch.
Right.
But it was very much like that in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as a first job, it was great. But then I realized that if I wanted to work in television, I needed to go out to LA. So I packed my bags and my cape and flew out to Hollywood. So I'll stop right there for a second, but that's the early part of my career.
So one thing I want to share with our listeners is one thing that you provided to me, Todd, that I've never, as a career coach, have never seen before, and I'm loving, is one thing I'm looking at as we're talking is your visual bio. And I think I'm going to include this in the show notes so people can see it, because it's just, as we say in Boston, it's wicked awesome. And it's really cool. And so I'm almost following along with what you're talking about, along this timeline of your life and all the different places you've worked, the things you've done. Although I don't see at the beginning of it anything about Superman or Batman.
Yeah, I started with college. That starts with college, so I cut that out.
I do see Newsday, which is the newspaper of my childhood, having grown up on Long Island. Yeah. I don't know if what role you had with Newsday. Did you have a paper route, or? I grew
up on Long Island, Comac, Long Island. And,
that's right. We've talked about that. Yeah.
And I basically, long story short, I was obsessed with reading Newsday. That's the paper I grew up with, even though I also read the Daily News and the Post, because my father would bring them home from work, and I always read the sports section and entertainment. When I went to school in Albany, 50% of the students at State University of New York at Albany were from Long Island.
Yeah.
So I missed getting the Suffolk edition of Newsday, and I actually got a summer job in single copy sales. That was my summer job my freshman year of college. And when I was there at Newsday, I talked to them. I said, is there any way of getting Newsday up at Albany? And they say every day, this is, for me, one of the things I want to say is I talk loud and fast because I'm from New York, but I am an extreme introvert. I always say 3 Bs, a back of the room, behind the scenes bookworm. So for me to even suggest this was so out of my comfort zone. But I said to them, is there any way of getting Newsday up in Albany? And they say, well, every day we put 10 copies of Newsday on a Greyhound bus, and that gets sent up to Albany for the Long Island legislators up at the state capitol. We can't just put one for you, but if we had enough students on campus who were interested, then maybe we could do that. So I actually stood on the dinner line and did a survey. Would you be interested in getting Newsday? And if so, the Nassau, Suffolk, or New York City edition. And I got 50 people to sign up, 50 students.
Wow.
So they charged me. So they put an extra 50 copies a day on my Greyhound bus. I picked them up, and I had my own paper route up at Albany. Newsday charged me 25 cents a paper. I charged the students 50 cents a paper. So every Friday, my desk at my dorm room was just piled with cash, with singles, and so while other students were selling drugs and other things, I was known as Mr. Newsday, and I was written up in the campus.
I love it.
So how was that for Andre? Dory Clark, our friend Dory Clark, has a book called Entrepreneurial You. So that was pretty entrepreneurial for
you were doing it before Dory even wrote about it. And one other thing I'll just mention quickly is that one of my classmates growing up in Bayshore, New York, Stacy Alter, who was also one of my very first podcast guests, was an investigative reporter for Newsday.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of linkages here. Yeah. So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt or take us off track here too much.
I haven't told that story in years, so I was happy to.
It's a great story, though, because, you think about all these little building blocks and things that we did in our younger years that gave us either a boost or a sense of confidence or a sense of what's possible, right? And I know that you had other things that happened throughout your working years that weren't always the bright spots. But I do have a question for you about the decision to go out to California, and that is, so you were working at Ogilvy Mather, you had this experience there. When you picked up and moved to California, did you have a job already lined up, or did you know what kinds of things in television you might want to do? Because I could imagine a young person saying, I want to work in TV, and having some glamorous idea about what that would entail. I'm wondering what your expectations were.
Yeah, there's so many related stories. So one, that was the single hardest decision I had ever made in my life, because one, again, as an introvert, as a homebody, I had never flown by myself before. I'd only been on a plane a couple of times before then, and never by myself. I had never lived away from home other than in the dorms in college. So again, I was 24, straight out of school. Any guesses, though, a couple of things that motivated me. New York in that era, and I don't want to age myself, but that was 1986 when I moved out there. Any guesses, Tammy, what my starting salary was at Ogilvy Mather in my first job out of college in 1986 as a media buyer?
Probably, well, I mean, I'm a couple of years older than you, and I know what I was making a few years earlier in the nonprofit world. So I'm guessing your salary was maybe 20, 25?
I always have my students guess. It was 12. My starting salary was $12,000.
Whoa!
Which is about what I charge now for a one-day leadership training program. So you look at how times have changed over the years. So trying to live in New York City at any point, maybe in the 1920s, you could have lived in New York City on $12,000 a year, but definitely not in the. So I was living with my parents in Comac, doing that 2.5 hour commute back and forth.
Oh, the Long Island Railroad.
Long Island Railroad. So, that 9 to 5 job turned into like 6 in the morning until 8 o'clock at night. And then you turned around and did it the next day. And all my salary went to my train ticket and dry cleaning. So I said, something's got to give. I didn't love my job. And so in a way, basically, long story short, my college roommate had moved out to LA. I went to visit him during my 1 week of vacation I got during my first year.
1 week of vacation.
You had to be there for like 9 months to earn that 1 week. I fell in love. I saw the Hollywood sign, and I'm like, this is where I belong. I got back to New York, told my parents I was moving. They were like, yeah, right. I literally gave my 2 weeks notice, packed my bags, and left. The hardest part was leaving my dog. So that was the saddest thing. But I tell this story, my story in my book. My parents dropped me off at JFK. I had my bags packed. I had about $1,000 in savings. And I'm getting on the plane after saying a teary goodbye to my parents. I got on the plane. I'm walking through first class to get to my coach seat, tears in my eyes, and someone's blocking the aisle. I said, excuse me, can I get by? And it turned out to be Grant Tinker.
Oh my gosh.
Was the CEO of NBC at the time. And my dream was to work at NBC at the time. I had interned at NBC the summer before when I was in college. So that whole flight, I was like, do I talk to him? Do I not talk to him? What do I do? My resumes were packed in my suitcase and my luggage, and I didn't have one with me. So again, extreme introvert. I'm like, I don't want to bother this guy. So what do I do? So 5 hours, the whole flight, I was just debating what to do. So just before we were about to land, we had just flown over Las Vegas, and we were just getting ready to start heading towards LA. I somehow got up the courage. I went up to first class. I said, excuse me, Mr. Tinker, my name's Todd. I started rambling. My name's Todd Cherches. I'm from New York. I'm moving to LA. I always want to work in television. I interned at NBC last year. And do you have any advice for me? I basically said that. This is what he did. He got up from his aisle seat. He didn't hit me. He got up from his aisle seat, moved over to the window seat, and he said, sit down. He shook my hand. So there I am. I'm 24. I'm in first class. And he said, what would you like to drink? Nothing alcoholic, but he ordered a Diet Coke for me. So I'm sitting in first class with Grant Tinker, who also was the ex-husband of Mary Tyler Moore.
That's right. That's right.
And he spent 10 minutes talking to me. He gave me his card and said, when you get out there, call my secretary. He said, I probably won't have time to talk to you, but call my secretary, tell her about this conversation, and she'll set up some meetings for you. How amazing is that in terms of, I do a lot of talk about gratitude.
How amazing. I don't know how to even quantify that.
Yeah.
So what happened when you got out there?
Again, some of these stories, that one is in terms of servant leadership. And one of the things he said to me, and that always stayed with me, is my people don't report to me, I report to them. My job is to set my people up for success and help them be better. So he gave me all these tips. And so long story short, I did not get a job at NBC. I did get a few meetings, but it gave me the courage and confidence that I was making the right decision. And it's an amazing story I've been able to tell for the last 30 years.
It's a great story. And it, can you imagine, there you are, an introvert, debating with yourself about whether to even approach him. And you got a conversation with him. I mean, he, that must have been so reinforcing for you.
It was exhilarating. And you know what it did? It reinforced in that moment that I had made the right decision. Like, it just gave me hope, right? And that's one of the things, there's a saying that Napoleon said, leaders are a dealer in hope. And he gave me hope, and he reinforced I was doing the right thing. And so it was great. And now the impact on me is, most of the time, if someone says, can I talk to you? Can I pick your brain? I say yes. Because I always have Grand Tinker flashing back.
Isn't that great? Brain. I love that.
He could have just said, sorry, too busy, can't help you.
Yeah. So everyone listening to this now, we'll make sure you have Todd's phone number, and you can call him.
Call me. I won't get any other work done, but yes. Especially with my students. Like, I have my students I've been teaching for 10 years. I'll get calls or emails out of the blue from students from 8, 9, 10 years ago, and I will always talk to them.
Isn't that nice?
I will always coach them. I will always advise them.
How nice is that they feel comfortable reaching out to you?
Yeah. In fact, I have a separate LinkedIn group just for my students. So when they finish my course, they get to sign up for this group. And it's like this, it's not Mr. Holland's opus. I don't expect them all to show up and at some point, but it is, that's one of the things I love about teaching, is the long-term relationships. And that's one of the things I say at the end of my course is, I'm not going anywhere. You now have a mentor for life. And
I love that.
Nice.
Oh my goodness. Wow. And we're still at you being 24 years old. This is going to be like a 3-parter, Todd.
I'll give you the real quick version. So I got a job working for Michael Nesmith of the Monkees. That was my first job.
What was the job itself?
Working in the mailroom, making his popcorn every afternoon, and stocking the refrigerator and delivering the mail. That was my job.
What kind of company did he have? He wasn't with the Monkees anymore.
No, he had a video production company called Pacific Arts Video.
Okay.
And his mother, not everyone knows, invented liquid paper, the original whiteout. And that's how he made his fortune. So he basically, not that he didn't make his own money through the Monkees and other things, but he definitely had a bankroll from the invention of whiteout and liquid paper.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So basically, I was working in the mailroom, and then one day someone said to me, they found out I had a master's degree, and like, why are you working in the mailroom? I was like, I just needed a job.
Yeah.
And they got me a job as a marketing assistant. So I got to be in the video production end of the marketing thing. And at night, I worked as a nightclub as a bouncer, which is a whole other story that I'll save for another day.
Okay.
That was my night job. So I did that for a while, and then I got let go from there because of they cut some jobs and they restructured, and the job wasn't perfect for me anyway. So then I got an internship at Aaron Spelling, working on Dynasty, just putting scripts together. Again, low-level job, menial job, but you're sitting there and Joan Collins walks in and says, where's Aaron, right? So it's kind of like amazing experience. My first real paid job was in casting at Columbia Pictures Television, typing up contracts. And I got to be, once you got to be on the studio lot of Columbia Pictures, I was like, I finally made it. Like, here I am in Hollywood. And that was fun. And then I got laid off from there because the writers went on strike. And then I got into the temporary pool at Disney, where I worked in 8 different departments over 8 weeks. And then when the strike ended, I ended up getting a job full time as a assistant to a writer producer. And that was my first real creative job in comedy development. So that was amazing, just sitting around all day, coming up with ideas for sitcoms, which was fun and amazing.
So I'm curious, Todd. So from starting, getting off the plane after meeting Grant Tinker to working for Disney, how much time had elapsed?
That's 4 years.
4 years. So when you went to do the internship with Aaron Spelling, I'm just curious. I think of a lot of people out there who are in their mid-20s, and they are, they're a few years out from school, and they're thinking, well, I'm a working person now. I wouldn't do an internship. And there you were, you already had an advanced degree, and it sounds to me like you were there to have the full experience, whatever that was, and you weren't going to let anything stop you.
Yeah, I mean, I was willing to work nights as a bouncer in the club until I got punched in the face one night and my glasses broken, and that's when my bouncing career ended after a couple of years of doing lighting. But yeah, I was willing. I advise my students, don't think of any job as beneath you. Look at everything as a learning experience. It's all about relationships. To be honest, it's like that's the hardest thing. Is like I got into the Michael Nesmith job was an ad in the paper, but Aaron Spelling, my friend Mark, was working there. He got my resume in the hands of the right people. Columbia Pictures, Mark can move over to Columbia, got my resume to the right person. My friend Seth was working at Disney. He got me into the temporary pool. So it's like you need to know people, but it's about developing relationships that are genuine. I always talk about 3 G's. Be genuine, be generous, and be grateful. Those are my 3. And my 4th G, John Baldoni wrote a book called Grace. So I added a 4th G, like be graceful, act with grace. And caring and empathy and compassion. But that's the thing. It's like be yourself, look at everything as a learning opportunity, but also when you're meeting people and developing relationships, always be thinking not how can this person help me, but how can I help this person?
Right.
If you start with that orientation, and what goes around comes around sometimes, and other times it doesn't, but it's just a good and the right thing to do. So if you approach everything from that attitude of what can I learn and how can I help, that's a different approach than give, me, what can I get from this?
Well, it sounds like that was some version of what even Grant Tinker was saying to you as from a leadership perspective. And it seemed to work pretty well for him.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So it's that servant leadership mantra of I'm here to serve, I'm not here to get.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would concur with that wholeheartedly. So it sounds like you had this really interesting opportunity with Disney. And I appreciate you pointing out the ways in which you found these opportunities too. I think that's very instructive. So how long were you at Disney for?
I was there for a year. I worked for this writer producer and his development deal ended. And when they didn't renew it, I was out on the street. So I tried as hard as I could to get another job within Disney. And again, you can imagine the demand to work at Disney, right? At the studio lot in Burbank. So, my greatest memory of working at Disney is I have to tell the side story. I'm walking across the studio lot and I hear someone say, "Excuse me, do you know which way the commissary is from here?" And it's Tom Hanks. So I said, "I'm going that way, come with me." So I'm walking across the studio lot for 10 minutes from the back lot to the commissary with Tom Hanks. Then we get online, we get our food, and we're just about to sit down to eat together when someone from his production team says, "Tom, we're over here." And he's like, "I'm so sorry. Do you mind if I go eat with them? I need to talk with them." So Tom Hanks is asking me, is it okay with me if I go eat with them? So that was my almost lunch with Tom Hanks, but I did get to spend 15 minutes with him, and he's as nice a guy as he is portrayed
as he seems to be. Yeah.
He was shooting Turner and Hooch at the time, and he wasn't like the huge star he is today, but he was still a name.
But you knew who he was already.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And in fact, when I got back to my office, there were about 10 voicemails from people like, "What were you doing?" talking to Tom Hanks. So people had spotted me and seen me. So, and when I was at CBS, my next job, I was sitting there one day, and Vanna White said, "Is anyone sitting here?" She was wearing her bathrobe, and her hair was in curlers in between shootings of Wheel of Fortune. So I got to have lunch so I didn't get to have my lunch with Tom Hanks, but I did get to have lunch with Vanna White. So
there you go. See?
So one of the reasons I love the entertainment industry, I love the glamour and the excitement and the parties and the screenings. But then when I worked at CBS, I had the literally worst boss in the entire world. And my book, by the way, is dedicated first to my wife, secondly to my parents, and thirdly to all the horrible bosses I've ever had, without whom the rest of my career would not, including this book, would not have been possible. So
I love it.
More about management leadership from these horrible bosses. But my boss at CBS, that's a whole other conversation, I'll say. But horrible experience working there, political.
What kind of role did you have there?
I was the assistant to the manager. The assistant manager of drama program development. At Disney, I was in comedy. At CBS, I was in drama. And I just had this boss who was just really abusive and sadistic and sarcastic, and just I actually kept an abuse log, which I still have. And the biggest story of that day that I tell all the time, it's in my book. I was sitting at my desk one time and I felt something whip by my head, and my boss threw a box of pens at me because they were the wrong ones. She wanted the Papermate fine point. These were the medium point. So in my class, when I'm teaching feedback, I say to my students, let's say one of your employees ordered the wrong pens. Is there any other way of giving them that feedback other than throwing it at their head? And we're like, nope, that's all I can think of. That's what I would do. I'm sorry, I'm at a loss here. I can't think of anything. So that was just one, indication. I think in these days that would be a lawsuit. Back then, it was like anything went.
Right.
And,
That was when? That was. I'm looking at your timeline. It looks like that was maybe.
That was like 92. That was like 93, 94. Yes.
Okay. And how did you land that job at CBS? Curious.
That was just through, actually, I heard about an opening at CBS in comedy development that someone had told me about. I interviewed for that job, did not get it, but the head of comedy said, I just hired someone. I wanted to meet you anyway, but there's an opening in drama. Would you be interested in that? So that's how I got. So that's another tip, is interview whenever you can, because you never know who you might meet or who can refer you to.
I agree.
I once interviewed for a job I was completely wrong for, and I knew that going in, but I wanted to just, first of all, practice my interviewing skills, but secondly, just meet and get it. And then the person said, we have a job that we haven't even posted yet, but you're perfect for it.
Yes.
And so I've gotten one job like that, and then one referral that they already hired someone literally that morning. So
yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
In fact, that happens more often than not. So it sounds like at that point, were you looking or wanting to continue in that kind of work, doing development work?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do, script development and coming and I love being in pitch meetings. I love the creativity of coming up with ideas for shows. It was almost like playing with Barbie dolls or G.I. Joes. It's like, what if we had this guy and this woman, and they have a family of four, and it's kind of like Charlie's Angels meets Miami Vice. So it was really like playing in the world of make believe. Only you're sitting there with major stars coming in and pitching ideas, and you get to go to the tapings. And I got to go. My friend Mark was doing the Lucy show, so I got to meet Lucille Ball. I got to meet George Carlin. So I know you're flipping.
People can't see me right now, but I'm Lucille Ball. My goodness.
And this was how old was she at the time? That was her last show. She had to be in her late 70s, late 70s.
Yeah.
But yeah, all these, I got to sit on Seinfeld's couch. I got to sit on Norm's bar stool on the Cheers set. So I got to, when you're working in that business,
right,
get to access to these things. And it was great and exciting. In fact, when I was at CBS, I got a call from a friend one day saying, Paul Rubens needs an assistant. Are you interested? I'm like, Paul Rubens? He said, Peewee Herman.
Yeah.
So I got to spend a half hour alone being interviewed by Peewee Herman to be his personal assistant. So talking about a surreal life experience.
I bet.
So
I guess that was not a job you went for, though.
I would have been taking it if I got hired, but I didn't. But what happened at CBS, I reached a point where I was so miserable in that job and the politics and the bureaucracy. And I was actually told, this is one of those things that I kept applying for jobs that I was right for and not getting them. And I kept hitting a ceiling. And finally, one of the executives said to me, he said, you never heard this from me, and I will deny I ever said this, but the CEO, and I won't mention his name, wants an all Ivy League team. And you went to a state school, and you're never going to get promoted to a management role here. So if you want a manager job, you're going to have to leave. And I said, what I've been doing. So the boss who threw the box that had pens on my head, she got fired like 6 months later. I took over her job, and then they replaced her instead of with me, even though I had proven myself. They brought in someone who had gone to Brown because the CEO had gone to Brown. So everyone there went to either Yale or Harvard or Brown or Princeton, and talk about a glass ceiling or a brick wall. So I'm glad they told me, though, because otherwise I would have kept applying for who knows how long and banging my head against the wall.
Right. So that was sort of the culture or the way things were done at CBS at the time.
At the time, yes.
And so you took your toxic boss's place, and then you were replaced.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, I know that it's not it sounds like you had a blast doing all these things, but I know it's not the most. There's a whole side of that world that isn't glamorous. That can be not glamorous, let's say.
Yeah, the Harvey
And
Weinsteins of the world are not, there's many of them. There's many Harvey Weinsteins. And I have to say Harriet Weinsteins. I had a lot of female bosses who were just as abusive, like the one who threw the pens at me. And that business is very much like Wall Street in many ways, about money, ego, power, control. Yeah. It's not about core values that are my core values. I wanted to be in it because of the excitement and the glamour and the creativity and the fun.
Right.
But the daily job, if you're not in that position, is a lot of drudgery. There's a legendary story when I worked at Columbia, is that an assistant got taken away by an ambulance, curled up in the fetal position under her desk because her boss had just beaten her into a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
So, and that was just one of many stories.
Oh, so, I'm sure there were many stories like that.
I think there's more protections now than there were at the time.
Yeah.
And with now the focus on diversity and inclusion and equity and belonging. But back then it really wasn't. It was just
anything. Right. But it sounds like there was enough, even with a bad boss, there was still enough there that kept you loving it. It sounds like, is that right?
Yeah, the glamour and exciting of being on the Disney lot every day, walking into CBS every day, and just the excitement of being around that environment and coming up with show ideas. But the day-to-day is typing up memos, filing, ordering pens, right?
Yeah.
It's like that classic joke about the guy who shovels elephant dung in the circus. And he complains about every day about how miserable he is. And then some people say, why don't you just quit? He said, and leave show business? Right?
So I'm looking at your bio here. I've got this beautiful visual bio. I can't wait to share this with people. So it looks like from CBS you went to Sequoia. What is Sequoia? All I know about Sequoia is that it's a type of tree. So
yeah. So basically my friend Seth, who had gotten me into Disney, had moved on to Sequoia. Sequoia was a theme park production company. That made theme park rides and attractions. They created all the robotic audio animatronic figures that you would see in smaller theme parks. The founder was one of the original founders of Disneyland. So he created like Pirates of the Caribbean and the President's Hall of Presidents. So he basically started his own company making these things. And their claim to fame at Sequoia was they made King Kong for Universal Studios. They built the monkey.
Yeah.
So that was one of their. So I was hired to be a project coordinator, and then ended up being promoted to project manager, where I ended up having to go to China to oversee the installation of a project. And I talk about that in my TED Talk, if you watch my TED Talk. And that's how, when I got to China, I had never had a passport before. I had never flown across an ocean before. I was terrified. I got thrown in, and I was there for 2.5 weeks overseeing the installation of this theme park attraction. And I had to communicate with our Chinese counterparts. And because neither of us spoke the other's language, we did a lot of communication through drawing. We would pointing. I said it was like Pictionary and charade.
Yes.
It was like word sounds like screwdriver, right? Or tape measure. So I started drawing a hammer or a nail or whatever. And that's how my visual thinking kind of took off, that, hey, this is another way to communicate through pictures and images and not just through spoken word.
So that really was the birth of some of the work and some of the messages that you're sending today.
Yeah. What's interesting is it is in retrospect, but it wasn't at the time. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Steve Jobs always said we connect the dots looking backwards. So now when I look backwards, I see that, so that's one of my prototypical stories of how, the power of visual communication.
Right.
And that's the foundation of everything that I do now. So Sequoia did theme park attractions, and I was at ShowScan, which did motion simulator rides, and I was a project manager there. And then after 10 years in LA, I had broken up with someone. All my friends who I met had all moved back to New York or Boston or Philadelphia, all the East Coast people that hung out together. And I got laid off from my last job, and I just said, and my father had just had open heart surgery, and my mother said, I think the universe is saying come back to New York. So that's what I did. After 10 years in LA, I packed up and moved back to New York. And I had no idea what I was going to do, but I applied for a job from an ad at the American Management Association. They were looking for a program manager to oversee their project management courses. And I interviewed for it. And this is one of those situations where they needed someone to revamp their mini MBA program, and they hadn't posted it yet. And they said, you know what, I think you'd be better at this. So it was the project management thing that drew me in, because I was a project manager. But when I got there, they said, can you do this? And even though I didn't have an MBA, I said, yes, I can do this. And that's where I started reading all these management leadership books. And that's what launched my career into management leadership development. So that literally came from a little tiny cut out with scissors newspaper want ad that
That's
it's so archaic
amazing.
now, right?
That's amazing. And I love that you stepped into that and said, I can do this, even though it really wasn't your background
Not at all.
in so many ways. And they felt you could do it too.
Yeah.
So
that's what launched my career into what I'm doing. And that was 1996. So that's what launched me into doing what I'm still doing today, which is management leadership and now coaching.
Wow. So if you were to characterize, because it's really interesting hearing about how you moved from one thing to another. I mean, a number of the moves that you made were a combination of, it sounds like your friends Mark and Seth played a key role in many of the moves you made.
They are in the acknowledgments of my book. Yes. So I never, and it's still two of my two closest friends. So
I love it. I think that's wonderful. And
Mark was my college roommate, and Seth I met out there in LA.
Okay.
New Yorker. So all of us New Yorkers, bonded out there.
Wow. And it's a real testament to you as a friend that you're all still good friends today, I'd say. So, when you had this dream of working in television and entertainment and you fulfilled that dream. So it sounds like it was a combination of what you were pointing to is the power of relationships. And also, I think your own drive and your willingness to, really check your ego at the door and just do whatever it took to get your foot in the door and be in these environments and appreciate being in these different places around these creative environments and saying, I don't really care that much about what I'm doing day to day, as long as I'm in a creative environment where there's excitement and interesting things going on. And, I think that just speaks volumes about how that kind of openness, I think, helped propel you from one thing to the next. And even so, going back east and sort of saying, I think it's time to go back east now, being open to that. And then the American Management Association and saying, I think I'll throw my hat into a different ring now. There's something really powerful about that.
Yeah, it's all choices, right? There's no right or wrong choices. They're just choices. The decisions we make, we weigh the pros and cons. Like when I left CBS for the job at Sequoia, it was very hard because I was leaving television. Everything I'd done from, like I talked about before, from my Superman dream at age 5 or 6 to finally getting at a TV network, I achieved it. I'm here at a TV network. Do I leave a TV network to go to a theme park company, which was not on my bucket list?
Right.
And I said it at CBS. I remember specifically saying I could always go back to television, and I never did. And it's just like Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken, two roads diverged in the yellow wood. And, you make, and he says, that has made all the difference. He doesn't say whether it was a good difference or bad difference. He leaves that for your imagination, but it made all the difference. And we again, on our career paths, we come to forks in the road, we choose one, and then you never know where it might lead. The job I took at LiquidNet, I never in a million years wanted to work in financial services or technology. Those were like the bottom of my list. I took that job, and it was literally the best job I ever had, for the best boss I ever had, and the best company and the best culture I ever worked for. So,
wow.
And I almost turned it down because I didn't want to work for a Wall Street company.
Wow. So that was the last employer you worked for before you started Big Blue Gumball, right?
Yeah, I got laid off from there in 2010 after 3 years because the financial crisis of 2008-9 finally hit the company, and they had their first layoffs in their history. So that's where I was at that crossroads again. Do I try to find another job as head of learning and development, leadership development somewhere, or go off on my own? And that's where I formed Big Blue Gumball with my brother. And that's we just had our 10-year anniversary. Actually, we started in 2010, so we're now starting our 11th year.
Wow, congratulations. That's amazing. So tell me, and I know you had, between the American Management Association and LiquidNet, you had a few other roles. I know one of them is that with Dale Carnegie?
Yeah, what happened was, long story short, I took a job after AMA, and that's a whole other story because they're much better now, but at the time there was a there were 3 different CEOs within like a 1-year period. And
Wow.
there was complete dysfunction and chaos. And the irony was, I always said at the time that was the worst managed company I've ever worked for, and they did the American average. So I don't want to disparage that, but now they are doing great, and they are great, and the people there are great. But at the time, so I left there. I took a job this was during the .com boom in New York, and I took a job for a company called Spire Media, which was a digital agency. This was the early days of the internet and websites. So I took a job. They're a Denver-based company that's still around and doing great, but they wanted to start a New York office, so they hired me to head up their New York office. And it was a business development role, which I didn't want, but I loved the company, the CEO, my first VP title, and the highest salary of my life. I took the job, and I immediately thrust myself into what I call on my passion skill matrix model, the failure zone, because I was completely not cut out for that job in any way. This was a job of smooze. What's the word I'm thinking?
Schmoozing
with people, breakfast, lunch, dinners, parties. That was not me at all.
Right,
so
right.
After 90 days, we both basically said, and also the .com crash had just started to happen.
Yeah.
We just said, what, this was great. This was fun, not working out. So then I was without a job. And that's when I started did some consulting for the Center for High Performance Development in London. They hired a few New York associates. But then after 9/11, I was not making any money. We were in depression as a city. I took a Dale Carnegie course just to connect with people, develop my people skills. And I had never spoken in public before in my life. And that gave me the skills and the confidence to do public speaking. And not only did I do so well, but they made me a class coach, certified me as a trainer, and I became their top leadership trainer.
Wow.
And I did that for a number of years, which ultimately led to my being hired as head of leadership development for LiquidNet, and then ultimately led to my teaching at NYU and Columbia. So if it wasn't for Dale Carnegie, I would still be that behind the scenes, back of the room bookworm that I was at the time. And now I could get up in front of 50,000 people if I had to, and I wouldn't think twice about it. So it's just amazing. I always say that to my students who are introverts and quiet and people who have the fear of public speaking. If I could do this, anyone can, because I was terrible at it and terrified of it. And I pushed myself until I got to the point where I did a TEDx talk and I teach, and I'm doing a podcast with Tammy Gouloub, and here I am. So look how far I've come. I couldn't even speak on the phone when I was a teenager. That's how
You've come a long way, baby, as they say. So what do you think was part of the equation that got you over the hump to be able to become a great public speaker?
Yeah, I mean, to me, like anything, it's developing your skills. As you develop your skills and get positive feedback, you develop your confidence. As you develop more confidence, you try again, you keep pushing yourself. And it's like this wheel, right? So that's what I always say to people, are you not confident because you're not good, or are you not good because you're not confident? And if you got better, maybe you'd be more confident. If you were more confident, maybe you'd push yourself again. So it's like, in Good to Great, Jim Collins talks about that flywheel effect of once you get it moving, and you have to get the momentum. But I always talk about the difference between 0 and 1 is 1,000,000 times bigger than between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4. So just getting up there for the first time will push you and get that wheel turning.
Yeah.
So that's what I would advise. In fact, in my NYU class, I have all my students, we do an exercise where they each have to speak within the first 10 minutes of my class in session 1. And I say to them, you have all just spoken more than I spoke in all my years of junior high school, college, and graduate school combined, because I never once spoke in front of a room.
Wow.
So, and they don't believe that, but they soon learn that is a true.
Oh my goodness. So tell us about Big Blue Gumball, and tell us more about the book, Visual Leadership.
Sure. Big Blue Gumball is a metaphor. A lot of the work I do around is visuals and metaphors. Big Blue Gumball is the world. The world, the earth, the globe is like a big blue gumball. However you want to take it, that's our metaphor. And our motto is we make training entertaining. So both my brother and I each worked in the entertainment and media businesses. So we bring our background in entertainment and media to the management leadership training and the presentation skills training and the team building work and the coaching work that we do. So that's our methodology. So my visual leadership approach, and that's a whole other podcast, I think, but my book, Visual Leadership, is about the fact that as a leader, how you lead and who you are as a leader is inseparable from the lens through which you see the world, right? So your background, your culture, your upbringing, your experiences all shape who you are and how you are as a leader. So as a leader, we talk about what's your vision, or so-and-so is a visionary leader, or having a leadership vision. So it's all about seeing. So seeing, noticing, looking, watching, those are all metaphors that we use. And it's,
Right.
my mantra is, how do you get people to see what you're saying, right? How do you get an idea out of your head and into someone else's head?
Oh boy,
That's the
yeah.
foundation of what my book is all about. And I break it down into 4 categories using visual imagery, mental models and frameworks, metaphor and analogy, and storytelling and humor. So those are my 4 categories. So that's in a nutshell, which is a metaphor, by the way. That's basically, that's what visual leadership is all about, is leading not only through your vision, but this is the other concept I talk a lot about lately. I call it flipping the eye. On the cover of my book is a rainbow colored eye, and the rainbow
Yes.
represents diversity and inclusion, as well as innovation and creativity. And it reminds us that no one in the world sees the world through the same lens that you do. So we need to try to see the world through the lens of other people with empathy and compassion, and help them make their visions a reality.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. That's what leadership is about. So on one hand, it's about making your vision a reality, but even more than that, it's helping other people realize their visions.
Yes.
And that's a summary of what visual leadership's about.
What a rich resource. And it's amazing to me that you can fit all of that in one book.
Well, I left about 1,500 pages on the cutting room floor that didn't make it into. So I would say the hardest part of anything is to decide not what to put in, but what to leave out.
Yeah.
So, but as a summation, my book's a sample of all the stories, my top models, my top metaphors, and getting people to just think and interact with the world more visually.
And even saying visually, you're talking about that metaphorically in many ways as well. So it's, it occurs to me that one of the things that people crave in the workplace and in all kinds of relationships is to feel seen, and heard. And even feeling heard means that they feel seen. And so what you're talking about with your book and with visual leadership is exactly that. If you can be a good visual leader, people will feel seen and heard by you. And oh my goodness, what's possible out of that is amazing.
Yeah, my 3 V's are visibility, voice, and value. Are you seen and how are you seen? Are you heard and how are you heard? And are you recognized and perceived as making a contribution? So that's one of the ways that I get people when I'm doing webinars to turn their cameras and their mics on, is that if your camera's not on and your mic is off and you're not even contributing in the chat box, then you're not really here. You showed up, but you're not making a contribution.
Yeah.
And don't you want to be seen? Don't you want to be heard? Don't you want to add value? And I say to my students, the success of our class is 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3. 1/3 is the content, 1/3 is my facilitation and teaching, and 1/3 is your contributions. And if I leave here and I haven't learned something from each and every one of you, then we've each failed each other. So, and you should be learning from each other. So just laying that foundation in session 1 of my NYU and Columbia classes sets the tone for, hey, let's learn from each other and with each other. And I, as the professor, I do not have all the answers. Bill Nye, the science guy, said everyone you will ever meet knows something you don't. And everyone in this class knows something
Absolutely.
that I don't know and that we don't. So just laying that as the foundation just gets things off to a running start.
Well, I have to say, Todd, that I know a lot now more from this conversation than I did before we started. And I am so grateful that we did this. I feel almost incomplete, but we're probably
You're supposed to say you complete me. Isn't that?
Well, I feel like there's so much more we could talk about here. And so maybe we will again at some point, but in the meantime,
the metaphorical tip of the iceberg, right?
Exactly. So how can people best find you other than me giving out your phone number? But what's the best way for people to find you and learn more about your work?
Sure. The best way is my brand new website just launched 2 months ago, toddcherches.com, and it's CHERCHES. And if you go to toddcherches.com and subscribe to my newsletter, you can download my list of top 52 visual leadership books to help you be a better visual leader. So that's a free download.
Wow. Okay.
And that's also an excerpt from my book. Secondly, link in with me. I live on LinkedIn half the time, so feel free to connect with me and drop me a note. And thirdly, check out my book, Visual Leadership, on Amazon or wherever books are sold. So those are the 3 best ways to learn more about.
Highly, highly, highly recommend Todd's book. And if you do link in with Todd, be sure to send him a note and let him know that you are connecting with him because you heard him on this podcast. So Todd, thank you once again for being here. This has been absolutely delightful. I think I'm going to be on a high the rest of the week from this.
That's great. And a good thing I talk fast because we probably packed 2 hours worth of content in podcast. So that's one of the benefits.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Well, was that fun or what? I hope you enjoyed my interview with Todd Cherches. It was so much fun to speak with him about his life and professional journey. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you're interested in any of the resources or links mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them on the blog page of my website at www.tammygoulerloeb.com. Just look for episode 117. Are you thinking about what's next for you? Perhaps you're feeling a little stuck. You can get specialized group and individualized support, insights, and accountability from a brilliant mix of professional women in a safe, non-judgmental creative space. Join one of my small hybrid mastermind coaching groups. We're starting on a rolling basis. You can learn more at https://bit.ly/navigating career change. If you were as inspired as I was by Todd Cherches, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd appreciate your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at www.tammygoulerloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcasts button and follow the instructions provided there. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late, nor too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. I'd really like to hear how it's going for you. Feel free to drop me a line. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.